The rain hadn't stopped all night. It slapped the tin roof in angry bursts, spilling through tiny holes that Amina had stopped trying to fix. The lantern flickered, casting her shadow long and tired across the cracked wall. She sat beside Musa's wheelchair, wiping his face with a damp cloth. "Easy, my husband," she whispered. "The pain will pass." Outside, thunder rolled like a warning drum. 5 years. 5 long years. Amina had given everything. Her laughter, her beauty, her youth. Once her eyes danced like stars. Now they only reflected duty. That morning she heard laughter drifting from the veranda. Musa's laughter, deep, loud, alive. Her heart lifted. It had been so long. Maybe the darkness was fading, but then... "She's useful," Musa said, voice heavy with scorn. "A free servant. That's all she is now." The word struck harder than the thunder. The glass slipped from Amina's hand, shattering across the wet floor. She stood frozen, the fragments glittering at her feet like broken promises. Outside, the rain raged louder, as if the heavens themselves were listening. No one saw it. But in that moment, Amina's silence cracked like lightning. And when an African woman's silence breaks, storms are born. Before the rain and the bitterness, there was laughter in Amina's home. Before the accident, their small compound in Kaduna smelled of roasted maize and motor oil, the scent of Musa's workshop, the rhythm of life that danced to the hum of his machines. He was the kind of man who could fix anything: radios, bicycles, even broken dreams. And when he smiled, people said, "Amina is blessed. Her husband is a man of golden hands." They met on a market afternoon when Musa repaired her father's broken lantern without asking for payment. Amina had laughed shyly and said, "Then let me at least feed you." That meal became a courtship, and soon after, a marriage filled with love and promise. Musa built her a small shop where she sold bread and beans. Together they planned to open a bigger workshop, a place where unemployed youth could learn a skill. At night, they sat on the veranda, talking about the future as the stars blinked like the eyes of their unborn children. Then came the day that split their lives into before and after. It was the Harmattan season, dry, dusty, and cruel. Musa had gone to fix a truck on the highway. Hours later, a neighbor burst through Amina's door, shouting, "Accident! Musa's been hit!" She ran barefoot through the dust, screaming his name until her throat burned. When she reached the hospital, she found her husband lying still, his legs wrapped in bandages, his eyes half open, filled with disbelief. The doctor's words fell like stones. "The spine is broken. He may never walk again." Amina refused to accept it. For weeks she lived between hospital benches and prayer altars. She fasted, cried, and begged God for a miracle. When the neighbors stopped visiting, she stayed. When the bills piled up, she sold her jewelry, her shop, even her wedding cloth, just to buy Musa's medicine. She became his nurse, his caretaker, his strength. Every morning she carried him to the veranda, wiped his sweat, and whispered, "We will walk again, my love." But as months turned into years, her voice became the only one speaking. Musa grew bitter. The man who once called her sunshine now barked orders like a master. His pride, once the root of his success, now poisoned everything around him. "Why do you stare at me like that?" he'd snap. "Because I still see the man I married," she'd answer softly. But that only angered him more. "Don't pity me, Amina. I don't need your eyes to remind me what I've lost." Neighbors began to whisper. Some said Amina was wasting her life. Others said she was an angel sent to test Musa's soul. Yet she stayed, believing love was not a fair-weather promise. It was a covenant, sealed in both laughter and tears. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she'd hold his hand and remember the man who once danced with her in the rain. And even though that man seemed long gone, she hoped, foolishly, that somewhere beneath the bitterness, he still loved her. But love can't survive where pride refuses to kneel. And on the morning she heard him call her a free servant, Amina finally understood. She had given everything to a man who had forgotten what love costs. Amina said nothing that morning. She simply gathered the broken glass, her hands trembling as the shards bit into her fingers. She didn't even flinch. Pain had become familiar. It was the language her life spoke now. Later, when Musa called out, "Amina, my tea," she brought it as always, warm, sweet, just the way he liked it. But this time she didn't look him in the eyes, Musa noticed. "What's wrong with you?" he barked. Nothing, my husband, she murmured. Nothing at all, but silence can be louder than shouting. And that day, the air in the house grew heavy, thick with words unsaid. That evening, Karim returned. His footsteps were bold, his voice too casual. "Ah, my brother? Still strong like a lion, eh?" He laughed, slapping Musa's shoulder. Amina stayed behind the curtain, listening. "Musa, a lion in chains, my friend. This chair is my cage. Karim, at least you've got someone to feed you, bathe you. Some men aren't that lucky. Musa, feed me? Humph, she only stays because pity is her meal." Amina's chest tightened. Her fingers dug into the curtain until the fabric tore. Karim chuckled softly. "Karim, then use her. If she wants to serve, let her serve." Their laughter cut through her like a blade. That night, when she lay beside him on the floor mat, because the bed now belonged to him alone, she stared at the ceiling until dawn. The sound of the rain had stopped, but inside her, a storm raged. Days turned into weeks. Musa's bitterness grew heavier, like a curse spreading through the walls. He started criticizing everything. The soup too thin, the clothes not ironed enough, the house too quiet. Sometimes he threw things across the room, things she'd bought with her own sweat. And Amina? She said nothing. Her silence frightened even the walls. One day, while washing Musa's clothes, she found a crumpled receipt in his pocket from a nearby bar. A place she'd never known he visited. Confused, she confronted him gently. "Musa, when did you go out?" His eyes narrowed. "What business is that of yours? You can barely move without help." "Then maybe Karim helped me." "What of it?" She swallowed hard. "You're sick, Musa. You need rest, not secrets." "Secrets?" He spat the word like venom. "You think because you feed me, you own me? Don't forget, this is still my house." Amina stared at him, tears burning behind her eyes. "A house without love is only walls, Musa." He slapped the armrest of his chair, shouting, "Get out of my sight!" She left quietly. But that night, for the first time in 5 years, she didn't pray before sleeping. The next morning, Musa's cousin Halima came to visit. She pulled Amina aside and whispered, "Sister, people are talking. They say Musa has been meeting someone, a young woman near the market." Amina's lips trembled. "That cannot be true," Halima sighed. "I didn't want to believe it either. But Karim, he's the one bringing her things, money, gifts." Amina felt her knees weaken. "And Musa?" Halima hesitated. "He calls her his second chance." Those words buried whatever was left of Amina's faith. That night, she watched from the window as Karim's motorcycle stopped near the gate. He handed Musa something wrapped in brown paper. She saw Musa hide it quickly beneath his blanket. When Karim left, she went to him. "Musa," she said quietly. "What did Karim bring you?" He sneered. "Medicine." "Medicine doesn't smell like perfume," she replied. He turned away. "You're jealous of what you don't understand." "Maybe," she whispered, "but I understand disrespect." He laughed, a cruel, bitter sound. "Disrespect? Woman, I gave you a roof when your father had none." "Without me, who are you?" Her heart cracked. She stared at him for a long time. Then, with a calmness that frightened even Musa, she said, "You're right. Without you, I forgot who I was." And she walked away, leaving him speechless. Days later, while cleaning the veranda, Amina found a sealed envelope behind Musa's old toolbox. Inside was a bank statement, her savings account. The money she had trusted Musa to keep for their future. Gone. Every naira. Her hands shook. On the line marked transfer recipient, the name read Karim Abiola. Amina's breath caught. The walls seemed to close in. She rushed to Musa's room, the statement clutched in her hand. "Musa! What is this?" He didn't even look up. "I used it. For what?" "For a business," he snapped. "A man must still provide." "A man?" She laughed bitterly. "You use the money I earned washing strangers' clothes and you call yourself a provider?" "Enough," he roared. "You should be grateful you still have me." That was the final spark. Years of silent endurance turned into fire. "Amina, grateful? For what? For chains I cannot see? For a man who calls me a servant while I clean his shame? Musa, you dare talk to me that way?" "Amina." "No, Musa. I dare talk to myself because I forgot how strong my voice was." He stared at her, shocked. He had never seen that light in her eyes before. Fierce, alive, unbroken. She looked at him one last time, tears glistening like truth. "May God show you what you've kept." That night, as thunder returned to the skies, Amina packed her small bag, 2 dresses, a Bible, and a single photograph from happier days. She left a note on his table. "I served you until I lost myself. Now I go to serve the woman I was before you." And before dawn, she stepped out into the rain, barefoot and free. The compound dogs barked as she disappeared into the storm. Inside, Musa sat in his chair, staring at the empty doorway. For the first time in 5 years, he felt something he hadn't felt since the accident. Fear, not fear of loneliness. Fear of losing the only person who had ever loved him enough to stay. For 2 days, the rain didn't stop. Musa sat alone in his chair, staring at the gate that no longer opened for Amina. Her scent still clung to the walls. Her soft humming still echoed in the corners. But the house was now a tomb, silent and cold. At first, he told himself she would return. "She's weak," he muttered. "She can't survive without me." But as dawn after dawn passed, the house stayed empty, and for the first time, his own heartbeat sounded loud enough to scare him. Amina walked miles through muddy paths until she reached the town of Zaria. She found shelter in a church compound, sleeping on a wooden bench with nothing but her faith and the clothes on her back. Each morning, she helped the nuns wash and feed paralyzed children. Their laughter reminded her of hope, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. "Your hands are gentle," said Sister Grace, the head nun. "Would you consider working here?" Amina hesitated, then nodded. "If I can help them heal, maybe I will heal too." Days turned into weeks, and soon she became the heart of the rehabilitation center. The children called her Mama Hope. They fought to sit beside her during story hour, where she told tales of strength and second chances. For the first time in years, Amina smiled without guilt. Back in Kaduna, Musa's health began to fail. Without Amina, his bedsores deepened, his meals were forgotten, and Kareem's visits grew rare. The friend who once cheered him now avoided the house entirely. One afternoon, Kareem finally appeared, drunk and angry. "Kareem, you think she'll come back? Ha! The woman you called a servant is now the talk of Zaria. She's healing people while you rot in your pride." Musa: "Lies. She's nothing without me." Kareem: "Nothing? Go see for yourself, if you can even move." He slammed the door and left. Musa sat in silence, the insult echoing in the empty house. Pride had been his only companion, but now even pride tasted bitter. A week later, a nurse from the city rehabilitation center visited the local clinic where Musa was being treated for infection. When she mentioned Amina's name, Musa's world stopped. "Amina? You mean Sister Amina?" the nurse said, smiling. "She's a miracle worker. The children adore her." That night, Musa couldn't sleep. Guilt pressed on his chest like a weight. He closed his eyes and saw her walking away into the rain, the woman he had broken, yet who had risen higher than him. 2 days later, his condition worsened. He was transferred to the same rehabilitation center in Zaria, the very place Amina now worked. When she entered the ward with a tray of medicine, she froze. Musa, pale, weak, and barely breathing. The man who once called her a free servant now couldn't even hold his own cup of water. Their eyes met. The world went quiet. "Musa, Amina." "Amina, don't speak. Save your strength." "Musa, I didn't mean it." "I was angry. I was ashamed." "Amina." "Shame didn't make you cruel, Musa. Pride did." He lowered his gaze. "Do you hate me?" She placed the cup on his tray and said softly, "No, I just learned to love myself more." Then she turned and walked away, her white nurse's cloth fluttering like wings. That night, as rain whispered against the windows, Musa whispered a prayer for the first time in years. "God, if she can forgive me, maybe you can too. But forgiveness isn't given to erase the past, it's given to transform it." And in that quiet moment, Amina's story changed forever, from servant to healer, from pain to purpose. 3 weeks passed in the rehabilitation center. Amina cared for Musa the way she cared for every patient, with quiet professionalism. No anger, no tears, just silence thick enough to crush him. Every morning, she entered his room, adjusted his blanket, and whispered, "Good morning, Mr. Musa." "No, my love. No husband. Just Mr. Musa." And each time, he felt the sting of his own choices pierce deeper than any wound. One afternoon, the power went out across Zaria. The ward filled with the hum of rain and the nervous shuffle of nurses lighting lanterns. Musa began coughing violently, his chest rattling like drums in a funeral procession. Amina rushed to his side. "Amina, breathe, Musa. Stay with me." Musa, struggling. Why are you helping me? After what I did? Amina, because I'm not you. Because mercy heals what revenge never can." She pressed a cloth to his mouth. Blood stained her hands, warm, dark, human. The same blood that once tied them as man and wife, now only a reminder of pain and choices. The doctor arrived moments later. "He won't make it through the night," he whispered. Amina stood still, her heart heavy but her eyes dry. The man she had once begged God to save now lay between life and death, trapped between guilt and redemption. That night, Musa requested to see her one last time. The nurse hesitated, but Amina nodded and entered quietly. The room smelled of medicine and rain. Musa's voice was faint, like the wind through dying leaves. "Musa, do you remember the day I fell?" "Amina, how could I forget? You told me God had cursed you, and I told you I would stay." "Musa, and you did, until I cursed you too." He turned his eyes toward her, tears shining in them. "Musa, I thought your kindness made me weak. I didn't see it was the only thing keeping me alive." Amina stepped closer, her face calm but strong. "Amina, Musa, forgiveness doesn't erase what you did. It only frees me from carrying it." He reached out a trembling hand. "Musa, do you forgive me?" Amina placed her palm over his. "Amina, I forgive you. But I cannot stay." And just like that, she turned and walked out, leaving behind not a wife, but a woman reborn. At dawn, the bell tolled from the church tower. Musa was gone. The nurses said his final word had been her name, but Amina didn't weep. She stood by the window, watching sunlight pierce through the clouds, the first clear sky in weeks. She whispered softly, "May your soul find peace, Musa. Mine already has." That evening, the center gathered to honor her work. The mayor himself came forward. "Sister Amina," he said, "you turned pain into power. You are the reason so many now walk again." The children she cared for ran up and hugged her legs, shouting, "Mama Hope! Mama Hope!" She smiled, not with pride but with gratitude. The woman who once begged to be seen now shone brighter than ever. The story ends not with death, but rebirth. For every woman who has been silenced, used, or broken, Amina became their echo. I was not created to be a servant. I was created to serve with purpose, and in that moment her storm finally cleared. The sun rose gently over Zaria, spreading gold across the red earth like a promise of new beginnings. The storm had passed, not just the one that had soaked the land, but the one that had lived in Amina's heart for years. She stood outside the rehabilitation center, her hands clasped, eyes lifted toward the hills. Birds sang again, their voices free, unafraid. Amina breathed deeply, the scent of wet soil filling her chest. It smelled like life, raw, forgiving, alive. For the first time in years, her shoulders didn't carry the weight of regret. The past no longer chained her. It had become a teacher. Every scar, every sleepless night, every insult from Musa had led her to this very peace, the kind you can't buy, only grow into. The next day, Sister Grace found Amina sitting with the children in the courtyard. The little ones, once broken and afraid, now laughed and played on crutches and wheelchairs that had become symbols of strength, not shame. "Your spirit is light today," Sister Grace said softly. Amina smiled. "Maybe because I finally let go of the heaviness that wasn't mine to carry." The nun nodded. "You carried a man's pride for 5 years. It's time to carry only your purpose." Amina rose and walked toward the garden where jasmine vines grew wild. She knelt beside a small patch of earth and began planting new seeds. A curious boy named Sani came to her side. "Sani, Mama Hope, why do you plant after rain? Won't the ground be too soft?" Amina, because my son, the rain prepares the ground, just as pain prepares the soul. The boy smiled, not fully understanding, but something in her voice comforted him. That evening, the town held a small service to remember those who had passed in the center that year, including Musa. Amina didn't plan to speak, but when her name was called, she stepped forward. The lantern light flickered against her face as she addressed the gathered crowd. Once, I thought love meant staying no matter the pain. But I have learned that true love begins when you choose peace over pride, healing over hurt. The man we remember today was not all bad, nor was he all good. He was human. And sometimes humanity needs forgiveness more than punishment. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to listen. To every woman who has been called weak for being kind, to every man who hides his pain behind cruelty, may you find the courage to see that kindness is not weakness. It is the fire that keeps the world warm. When she finished, the hall was quiet. Then, one by one, people began to clap, not out of celebration, but reverence. Later that night, Amina sat alone by the river that bordered the town. The moonlight danced on the water, silver and soft. She thought of Musa, not as the man who broke her, but as the man who taught her what she would never again accept. She whispered a prayer. May your soul find rest, Musa. You gave me pain, but pain gave me purpose. A cool wind brushed her cheeks, and she closed her eyes. It felt as though the world was answering back. The trees swaying, the river whispering, "You are free." Months passed. The rehabilitation center grew under her guidance. Donations came from across Nigeria. Volunteers arrived from other towns. Amina's story spread, not as gossip, but as testimony. Newspapers called her the woman who turned suffering into strength. But Amina never sought fame. When people praised her, she simply smiled and said, "God writes straight with crooked lines. I just followed the ink." One afternoon, while tending to the garden, Amina noticed a young woman standing shyly at the gate. Her clothes were torn, her eyes swollen from crying. "Amina, come in, my child." "What troubles you?" "Young woman, my husband beats me. He says I'm useless, but I have nowhere to go." Amina's chest tightened. The story was too familiar. She guided the girl inside, offering water and food. "Amina, listen to me, my daughter. You are not useless. You are simply in the wrong place to be valued." Young woman, whispering, "What should I do?" "Amina, first breathe, then live. The rest will follow." The girl broke into tears, clinging to her. Amina held her close, whispering the same words she once needed to hear. "You are not broken. You are becoming." That night, the girl slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, and Amina realized that her purpose had just multiplied. Her pain had birthed a mission. Over time, the center became more than a place of healing. It became a home for women rebuilding their lives, for children rediscovering hope, and for men learning that vulnerability is not weakness. Amina started a small initiative called Hands That Heal, teaching women to care for the sick and elderly with dignity and pay. Her goal was simple: no woman should ever feel like a free servant again. Within a year, her program expanded beyond Zaria, reaching nearby towns and villages. When reporters asked her how she found the strength to do it all, Amina answered, "Strength doesn't come from revenge. It comes from releasing the pain that tried to destroy you." But Amina's most sacred moment came one quiet evening. She stood in the church courtyard looking at the sunset. The sky burned orange and crimson, colors of endings and beginnings. Sister Grace joined her and said, "You've done enough, my child. You've turned your pain into legacy." Amina smiled. "No, sister. I just learned that storms don't always come to destroy. Sometimes they come to clear the path." She looked toward the horizon, her voice barely a whisper. "Once I was called a servant. Now I serve, not because I have to, but because I choose to." The church bell rang for evening prayers. Children laughed in the distance, and for a moment, everything was still, the way the world feels after a long cry when peace finally returns. Amina walked back inside, her white scarf fluttering in the soft wind. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because her story, the story of the woman who loved, lost, and rose again, was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every soul who ever chose healing over hate. The rain that drowns the weak can cleanse the strong. When love becomes chains, break them gently, not with anger, but with courage. In the land of storms and sunshine, Amina's tale became more than just a story. It became a mirror. For every heart that has been used, for every soul that has been silenced, her life whispers one truth. You can't control what breaks you, but you can choose what it builds. Amina learned that love without respect is slavery, and forgiveness without wisdom is surrender. When she walked away from pain, she didn't walk into loneliness, she walked into freedom. So if your kindness has ever been mistaken for weakness, remember, the rain that once drowned you can also help you bloom. This is Mama's Tales, where every storm hides a lesson and every heart finds its strength again. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and let your spirit rise.